Religion plays such an important part of India's past and present that it is integral to its culture. But it is the diversity of religion that is most impressive in this massive country. There are huge populations of Muslims and Hindus. The majority of Sikhs, Jains, and Parsis live here as well, and there are large minorities of Christians and Buddhists. Just about every sect you can think of is here, but the core and majority is Hindu. It is to two of these holy places in Hinduism and Jainism that we venture today. But that's not all. We will also visit one of the birthplaces of Buddhism. So join us today as we visit Central India, land of pilgrimages.
Namaste, I'm Bill Ball, and I'm going to be your guide on this episode of Journeys in India. And this is India. Today we're going to visit two incredible sites, Khajuraho and its great temples, and Varanasi with its connection to the Ganges. They're both important to India culturally and religiously.
We will start our visit in one of the most beautiful and probably controversial UNESCO religious sites in the world, Khajuraho.
I'd like to start by breaking the biggest myth about Khajuraho, and that is that all of the statues are about erotica. In fact, only 10% of them are. The rest of them are about everyday things like work, play, you name it, anything but erotica.
These mostly non-erotic statues are located in a series of temples near the present-day city of Khajuraho in the state of Madhya Pradesh in north-central India. It is easily reached by air with daily flights from Delhi, Varanasi, and Mumbai. The temples are quite impressive. Built between the 10th and 11th centuries by the Chandela dynasty of central India, they were the religious core of that time. With the fall of the dynasty in the 1200s, the temples were abandoned and hidden under dense palms. The name Khajuraho is derived from khajur, the Hindi word for palm. The temples were rediscovered by British Army engineer T.S. Burt centuries later, but by then only a quarter of the original temples still existed. But this still has left 22 unbelievably carved temples, some Hindu and some Jain, to marvel at today. The temples are open to the public, many restored to fully appreciate their architectural and artistic detail. For instance, on the Shiva temple, there are over 500 different hairstyles on the statues. These exquisite carvings depict the growth and maturity of women. But this is one of the erotic temples. Khajuraho was made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986. That means the site is so important that it should be protected by the world for all of mankind. But of course, it is the womankind that is most predominantly featured. The temples are grouped into three geographic divisions: Western, Eastern, and Southern. Made primarily of sandstone and granite bases, they were held together not by mortar, but joints and gravity. Many of the massive columns were carved out of huge stones weighing over 20 tons. The region around Khajuraho is rich in strong but carvable sandstone, which lent itself to the incredible work done on these temples. Many historians and architects have called the carvings the best in India, and maybe the world. Any complex this large has many secrets and mysteries. Khajuraho is no exception. In the front of the Western Hindu Lakshmi temple is a statue of a lion eating a person. It is not there to intimidate or frighten would-be pilgrims. It is in fact the symbol of the Chandela kings who built the temple. Okay, so maybe the kings picked it as a symbol to intimidate and frighten, but that's another story. The Eastern temples are Jain temples. Jain is a religion that you might say is a reformed Hinduism. It was begun in the 6th century BC as a counter to strict Orthodox Brahmanism. It emphasized the purifying ability of the human soul through self-discipline and non-violence to all living creatures. Jains also believe in open-mindedness to others' beliefs and ideas. Though the Jains lifestyle, vegetarianism, and nonviolence may seem hard for some to imagine, the ideas of world peace and tolerance are not just catchphrases, but everyday actions. As one stark reminder of their beliefs, no one wearing leather may enter their temples. So if you plan to enter a Jain sanctuary, stick to cotton, polyester, and plastic. The Jain temples are some of the most intricately carved in the whole of Khajuraho. It is assumed that the large, flourishing Jain population in the 10th and 11th century lived on the eastern side of Khajuraho, since the 31 Jain temples were all located together in a tight grouping. Some of the largest statues are also found here. Jains do not have a deity, but believe in rebirth and a never-ending universe. No matter which of the temples you visit, there are just a few etiquette rules to follow. Remember, these are religious places and a respectful attitude is required, even when viewing the more erotic statues. And secondly, shoes are to be removed before entering any of the temples. The temples are much simpler inside than on the outside, though not completely without ornamentation. These were and still are places of worship for Hindus and Jains. Only one southern temple is left, and that is a Hindu temple dedicated to the god Vishnu. In some ways, having one temple to look at is refreshing. The eastern and western groups are so large and beautiful, it is hard to see the detail or religious significance of any one temple. Here, no decision need be made. There is just one. Probably built around 1100 AD, it follows the ancient Hindu practice of facing south, the same direction that a similar time period temples of Angkor Wat in Cambodia are oriented. The centerpiece of the temple is a statue of Vishnu with 4 arms. In fact, the temple's name means 4 arms. There are no erotic statues here, as is in the case of most Hindu temples almost everywhere, but in Khajuraho. The temple is a distance from both the western and eastern groups, but the short car ride is worth it, if for no other reason than to see how a more typical Hindu temple looks. For me, it is the magnitude of the temples, the rich carvings, the massive construction, and their getting lost to the jungle and their subsequent rebirth that makes them so special. The town of Khajuraho is pretty much dedicated to handling the tourists and pilgrims that come to visit these incredible monuments. Many are employed in hotels and restaurants, while others continue to work on the restoration of statues and the temples themselves. The tourist facilities run the whole range of budgets, but good, moderately priced Western hotels are also available. Many of those hotels, like the Ramada, where we chose to stay, emphasize service as well as comfort. I do caution you on choosing lower-priced options. You often get what you pay for. I choose my hotels based on quality versus price, attempting to get the best value, but not necessarily the cheapest price. Khajuraho is a draw for tourists, though you don't have to worry about crowds. The day we spent at the monuments, there couldn't have been more than 20 other people spread over acres of space. But being a tourist destination, there has to be the perfunctory cultural show. I have seen many of these shows around the world, and most have dancers and singers going through the motions in uninspiring numbers. That is not the case here at all. They move fast from solo dancers to group dancing to local musical numbers. All are done with relevance and reverence to the great monuments of Khajuraho. The style is reminiscent of other Eastern dance and music cultures, but has its own twist. It is a thoroughly enjoyable and inexpensive night out. The next morning it was up and off to the airport. We were heading to the most sacred city for Hindus. Khajuraho was important to both Jains and Hindus, but our next destination, Varanasi, is the most important pilgrimage city for Hindus, sort of their Mecca, Rome, or Jerusalem. Varanasi is located in the state of Uttar Pradesh, in the north-central part of India, along the river Ganges. Mark Twain wrote in 1896 that Varanasi was older than history, older than tradition, older even than legend, and looks twice as old as all of them put together. This hasn't changed much in the intervening 120 years. Varanasi has been known by two other names, Kashi for the shining city and Benares meaning benefit of sin. But the current name, Varanasi, probably is the most fitting since it means remover of sin. As a spiritual center for Hindus, it is rivaled only by the holy river Ganges itself, which is the basis and soul of the city. But it holds significance for two other religions as well. Varanasi was chosen by Buddha for the first turning of the wheel of his law for mankind, and it was here that the 23rd holy man for Jains was born. But the city is a city, and there is more to it than its religious life. At the far end of town, where the sounds of the religious rites are not audible, there is a village, unlike anywhere else in India. As tourists, we often miss the everyday sight of attraction zones, so I wanted to make sure of not doing that myself. The temples here are for local worship, not the throngs of thousands of pilgrims and sightseers. But because this is Varanasi, the local temples date back to the early days of the city and is over 1,000 years old. I don't think anything defines a city more than its children. They are the real reason it exists, and they are its future caretakers. I can't help myself when it comes to kids, sports, and trying something new. For me, that is the unresistible trinity. You probably can't tell by my play, but I had never played cricket before. I think my all-around skills impressed the kids as well. So much so, they let me go to, as one young man said, do something I can even be better at. That, I guess, is being the best observer I can be. To me, a good tourist is one that is constantly learning and experiencing everything they can. And in Varanasi, that can be overwhelming on the senses. There are over 700 temples here. None are more sacred than the river itself. The Ganges is worshipped as a living being with, as Varanasi means, the power to cleanse all sins. To accomplish that, daily worship called an arti is done at dawn and dusk. The more impressive is at night. There can be several temples, each running their own arti, where oil lamps and incense are lit and waved in the air that captivate the worshipers and observers alike. Flowers are offered and bells and chimes are sounded, all part of the ritual. And of course, all this is done at the edge of the Mother Ganges. Unlike Khajuraho, there are huge crowds here virtually year-round, but the ordered chaos is not only worth the spectacle, but seeing the face of the faithful is a moving experience, even for non-Hindus. Sometimes, seeing someone else's journey can be nearly as satisfying as taking your own. You might say, travel is the original reality show. With the coming of dawn, the city reveals itself in a whole new light, so to say. You can see the ghats, about 90 of them lined along the Ganges better. The ghats are the steps leading down to the river. These ghats stretch over 3.5 miles and serve as the centerpieces for the faithful's pilgrimage. One of the rites that many of the visitors partake in is bathing in the holy river. Said to wash away sins, men, women, whole families bathe and pray along the Ganges. One of the most touching rituals that are performed around the Ganges is the lighting of candles in a specially made floating flower and releasing them in the water. This is done as a remembrance for lost loved ones. The cycle of life is played out along the river, from prayer to washing away sins to cremation. 2 of the ghats are dedicated to these final services. When cremation is complete, the ashes are put in the Ganges for purification. Any partially burnt wood is taken to the temple and is used by the priests for healing. The river has many less overtly religious uses as well, including the washing of clothes, as a draw for tourists, and a conveyance for souvenir hawkers. There is no easy way to escape that. But all in all, the ghats along the river provide a serene, almost spiritual feeling for the Hindu and non-Hindu alike. Knowing that Varanasi is primarily known outside of India as the most sacred city in Hinduism, I didn't imagine that it had another just as famous, at least in India's side, making wedding saris. Varanasi saris are very popular for weddings. Wealthy people in India, the US, and Canada often order multiple custom-made saris from here. The most expensive and beautiful ones are handmade in the shops of this holy city. Known for incorporating metallic thread into the saris, some of gold or silver, it can take the best craftsmen 7 hours to weave a square inch of material and 2.5 to 3 months for a complete wedding sari. Luckily, Indian tradition allows saris to be worn to other people's wedding, so they don't sit in a box in the attic until your daughter decides she may or may not want to wear it. These textile workshops produce other fabrics as well, including bed coverings, artistic wall hangings, or even exquisite pieces of art for your floor. There is something for every price tag, from a few dollars to one special piece that took nearly 3 years to complete and sells for $30,000 US. This masterpiece of a wall hanging took 6 weeks to make, but you can get larger products that can take 2.5 to 3 years to make. There are no formal schools for brocade workers. It is an apprenticeship that lasts 15 years before one is considered a master. The oldest master in Varanasi was 108 years old. This is a lifelong career. The shop's owners have been in this same business since the 16th century. Now that's staying power. On this religious journey of mine, there is one more city to visit. This one sacred to Buddhists, Sarnath. Many people know that Varanasi is a holy site for Hindus, but very few know that nearby is another site, just as holy, but for Buddhists. That site is Sarnath. Sarnath is only 5 miles from Varanasi, easily accessed by good roads. Sarnath is the holy place for Buddhists since this is where Buddha gave his first sermon. It is a pilgrimage destination as it is often regarded as the birthplace of the religion. Much of the main temples and monasteries were destroyed in the 1700s for use in building materials for Varanasi. But what is left are the foundations and partial walls of what would have been a huge complex. The largest stupa is still basically intact, a solid round tower 90 feet in diameter. Including its base, it is over 130 feet high. Iron clamps were used in its construction to hold it together. This structure, by its size and position, was probably the most important in the complex. It may commemorate, or it may be the actual spot where Buddha delivered his first sermon. Either way, it is an impressive structure. Across from the Sarnath monument stands one of the most important museums in India. The Archaeological Museum of Sarnath was opened in 1910 as an on-site museum for finds of the excavation work done here. What makes it so important is one of the statues recovered, the four-headed lion. This 8-foot-tall sculpture once crowned a pillar that was outside the main temple. The four lions were roaring form of Buddha, looking in all directions. This statue has become the symbol of India and is seen on government buildings and the national flag.
The visit to these two cultural sites has been quite exciting for me. Varanasi because it's so important to the Hindu faith, and Khajuraho because the temple carvings are so intricate, and not for the reason you think. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
The temples at Khajuraho were an incredible mix of erotic and non-erotic carvings. The Western temples were of Hindu origin and showed the quality of artisanship dating back to the 11th century. The Eastern group of temples were Jain. This Hindu breakaway faith has its own style of art that exemplifies its commitment to non-violence to all living beings. The Jain faithful still see these temples as a place of pilgrimage and solace. The lone temple of the south is worth the extra effort to see. This Hindu temple is noteworthy for its statuary, where it got its name as the place of the four-armed Vishnu. But Khajuraho is more than its monuments. It is a place for performing arts as well, and the cultural review here is second to none. Varanasi is the most sacred city for those of the Hindu faith. The spiritual atmosphere is contagious, especially watching the arti ceremonies at night. The daytime in Varanasi is no less religious. Bathers take to the river for a ritualized cleansing. The most holy part of Varanasi is the river itself, the holy Ganges. Varanasi is more than a place of pilgrimage. There is a whole town of people who live in the shadow of the Ghats. Take a moment to leave the hustle and bustle of the river and see how the locals live. The best travel experiences are often the connections we make. Sarnath is the third sacred city we visited. It was here Buddha delivered his first sermon and Buddhism was born.
I'm Bill Ball, and I'll see you on the next episode of Journeys in India.